Most people would agree the world we live in is unfair, unequal, and full of inequality. But how we should define inequality, specifically social inequality, has been debated frequently. Sociologists would argue a good foundational definition of social inequality would be differences in income, resources, power, and status within and between societies. Such inequalities are maintained by those in powerful positions via social institutions and social processes. One of the effects of social inequality is the way it impacts multiple levels of individuals' and groups' lived experiences. We can think of the experience of social inequality as a spider web, spreading out and impacting various areas of life. Let's look at each of these areas and think about how income inequality, resource inequality, power inequality, and status inequality can impact varied aspects of the human experience. You might reflect on the film we viewed for this week to think about the interaction of these different areas of inequality. There are also other areas we could add, including education as well as political participation. So, why does social inequality matter? Beyond the fact that hopefully we all want to live in a more egalitarian world. Well, one reason is that social inequality results in health and social problems. Look at the table on the screen, which compares approximate life expectancy in years and 2017 GDP per capita for three different nations. Now, as a reminder, GDP per capita is gross domestic product divided by the total population. If you look at the row for Indonesia, you'll see that the approximate life expectancy is 37.9, and the 2017 GDP per capita was 1,079.6. In contrast, in the United States, approximate life expectancy jumps to 78.5, and 2017 GDP per capita it also rises to 39,720.4. Iceland is the exemplar, where the approximate life expectancy is 82.4 and GDP per capita is 70,056.9. If you look at the data for all of the nations in the world, you'll see a trend emerge. When 2017 GDP per capita is higher, life expectancy is also higher. And when the 2017 GDP per capita is lower, life expectancy also tends to be lower. Now, it's not a perfect correlation. For example, Afghanistan has an approximate life expectancy of 42.6, and their GDP is only 585, which makes it about half of what Indonesia is, and yet the life expectancy is longer. But you do see a general trend suggesting that nations with higher GDP per capita have populations that live longer. Inequality also generates political instability, and political instability often proliferates inequality, creating a vicious cycle. This makes sense if we consider that unequal societies are much more prone to destabilization, politically motivated violence, and terrorism, because conflict originates from social grievances and perceptions of inequality. Researchers have found redistributive policies in India have been shown to effectively diffuse conflict. Countries that experience political instability often experience circles of low investment and low or negative growth. And political instability in African nations have shown to be detrimental to the reduction of poverty levels. Social inequality extends beyond income, and there are severe consequences for the most vulnerable populations, such as children, the elderly, disabled folks, and members of marginalized groups. For example, children living in low income countries are less likely to attend primary school. They're nearly twice as likely not to receive certain vaccinations, and they are twice as likely to die before the age of 5. These children are also significantly less likely to have access to clean drinking water, and young girls are 3 times more likely to be married before the age of 18. In addition, social inequality increases the likelihood of individuals engaging in high risk behavior. As we saw in the reading this week by Block, where individuals in developing nations were selling organs for little profit, often putting their own health at risk. In the film you watched this week, Living on $1, 2 young American filmmakers travel to Guatemala to better understand the experience of global poverty and social inequality. How does the film illustrate the experience of social inequality outlined in this week's reading by Warwick Booth and Block? Give an example of the film to illustrate.